With Unity 6 right around the corner on October 17th, the keynote this year was absolutely massive. I'm your host, Unity Guy, and today we're going to be going over all the highlights and everything coming in the Unity 6 engine. A lot of people, including myself, are still a bit disgusted with the corporate side of Unity after they tried to change their pay model earlier this year, but keep in mind most of the stuff you see today is the work of the engineers behind the scene, so keep an open mind, and I think it's something we should give credit where credit is due. Keynotes tend to get a little long and corporate-y just by the way they're run, so I'm going to try and keep this as concise and short as possible. The biggest focus with any game engine release is always graphics, and Unity showed up today. They started by showing off this beautiful new render called Time Ghost that's a 4-minute cinematic. I'll have it linked below if you want to watch the whole thing. It looks fantastic and it uses a lot of the new tools that Unity's implementing. I think this is finally looking like their Unreal Engine 5 next generation graphics competition. While something like this would have been possible in the old Unity engine, the performance you would have gotten would have made it a complete joke. Take a look at the lighting and effects specifically, not just in the foreground but also in the background. It really is incredible how much is being rendered in this scene. After the cinematic finished, we got a look behind the veil where they actually showed it in the Unity engine. We get to see the new light baking architecture and adaptive probe volumes in action. These systems allow for easier high-end lighting, focusing on where the majority of the geometry is in the scene, and look like there will be some very nice tools to add to any high-end project. Anyone who knows Unity well knows they're not focused on the high-end graphics though. Unity has an absolute stranglehold on the mobile market, and a lot of the new tools we saw are focused more on that. Starting with the GPU resident drawer and split graphics jobs, these sound like they're going to be simple tools to implement that just reduce load on the CPU and GPU by up to 50%. I don't think anyone's going to complain about free performance upgrades. Next, we have the new GPU occlusion culling. If you don't know what occlusion culling is, it's essentially objects drawing over each other and the ones in the background won't be rendered. This new system is supposed to be better than ever and will reduce a massive load on the graphics card. Last up, we have spatial temporal post-processing. This to me sounds exactly like what AMD and Nvidia have been doing with AI upscaling through graphics, but instead of having to rely on GPU upscaling, it's baked directly into the engine. We can see a lot of these tools showcased with the Fantasy Kingdom demo. This demo came out for the 2023 keynote, but they had it running on mobile at a stable frame rate this year, which is pretty incredible. At the end of the day, these tools seem like they're going to be extremely useful for anyone, whether you're making an extremely high fidelity graphical game or a very easy to run mobile game. Next up, we have something that I'm personally excited for, and that's a revamp of the Unity multiplayer system. It's crazy to me that the best options for multiplayer currently are third-party solutions, but it looks like Unity is really starting to fight back against those solutions like Mirror and Fishnet. The first big change is the new multiplayer center. This will help you get a project started and change packages quickly by having simple button clicks to determine what multiplayer packages you want included in your project. Unity is also integrating more of their multiplayer services package directly into the editor just to make everyone's life easier. And for anyone who's actually tried to make a multiplayer game in Unity, you know how hard it is to actually test your project, often having to run multiple builds outside of the editor and including specific code just for testing. Well, now you can run multiple test instances of your game directly in the editor, and this would have saved me so much headache with all the multiplayer stuff I've worked on in the past. Now, they didn't really spend a direct section in the keynote talking about this, but they did mention it multiple times, and fortunately it does take a large section of the blog from the keynote. Not only is Unity 6 supposed to be more stable and performant, but they are also fixing some huge problems I've had with the editor in the past of having way too many versions and updating way too often. Every time you wanted to update your editor, you also had to update your project, and this would often break your project and lead to major problems having to revert to the last version. So if they follow through on this and the stability really is better, hopefully we'll have much easier updates and everything will be much more streamlined. I've still been using the 2022 version of the editor, and just look how many versions they made for this. Imagine updating your editor and your project each time you want to do one of these new versions. It was an absolutely horrible system and something that really needed to change, so I'm glad they addressed this directly. And now for the one part of the keynote I was really disappointed in and I thought was a really negative thing. Everyone just loves live service games, and Unity is adding a lot of new tools for companies that want to do live service and very large companies that want to keep these live service games going for a while, and I think live service is just a disgusting model, and I don't want to talk about this, so we're skipping over this part. There was one cool random surprise towards the end to end on a high note. Unity is randomly making an in-browser game export option, so if your game is performant enough and the graphics are able to run at a low enough setting, you're actually able to run fully fledged games in a browser, which is pretty incredible. The demo they showed off looks surprisingly nice, and I'm really surprised they were able to get this running in a browser. Anyways, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you're looking forward to Unity 6 as much as I am. This looks like a pretty big step for Unity, so I'm excited to see what new features come in the 6.1 version and beyond.